Pam Bondi, who was confirmed earlier this year as the 87th United States Attorney General. The President has requested $33.6 billion for the Department of Justice for FY 2026. This is a reduction of $2.5 billion, or 7%, from FY 25 enacted levels. This cut entails the reduction of approximately 5,100 positions, including attorneys, special agents, deputy U.S. Marshals, and professional staff. I commend the Attorney General for her efforts to streamline the department, achieve operational efficiencies, and find savings for the American taxpayer. Even having said that, though, I am concerned by the depth of some of the proposed cuts. This includes, most importantly, cuts to DOJ law enforcement agencies and cuts in the DOJ grant programs that support state and local law enforcement. For example, the request proposes cutting funding from the Drug Enforcement Administration by $111 million, and further proposes $100 million in prior year appropriations. The benefits of our investments in DEA speak for themselves, because just last month the department struck a decisive blow against the Sinaloa cartel and executed the largest fentanyl bust in DEA history. I don't believe any of us want to forego incredible work being done by the DEA, as well as all of the department's law enforcement components. The budget further proposes a number of reorganizations within the department consistent with its agency's reorganization and reduction plan. I'm open to agency reorganization proposals. Everyone on this dais knows how hard they can be to achieve, but that should not stop us from finding ways to streamline the federal government and save taxpayer dollars. Some of the proposals will require further deliberation. I have heard concerns with the proposal to merge the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms into the DEA. These concerns come from state and local law enforcement officials in my home state, who depend upon ATF's NIBIN network to develop critical intelligence on crime guns. I've also heard serious concerns from Second Amendment advocates, and I believe it has been fairly raised about the propriety of associating firearms, a constitutionally protected right, with the truly evil things such as fentanyl, methamphetamine, and Mexican cartels. General Bondi, it is my hope that the department will work collaboratively with us, this subcommittee, to evaluate the reorganization proposals and, where appropriate, make changes. General Bondi, I thank you for your testimony today. I look forward to hearing what you have to say in response to my Senate colleagues' questions. And at the moment, I recognize Senator Van Hollen for his opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome, Attorney General Bondi. The Department of Justice is supposed to play a vital role in defending our Constitution, upholding the rule of law, and keeping the American people safe. Unfortunately, it's currently failing on all these fronts. And this budget request will make a bad situation even worse. We are witnessing a level of lawlessness from this administration that is unprecedented in scale and scope. Indeed, when asked, President Trump said he didn't know whether he was required to comply with the Constitution of the United States. Instead of defending the rule of law, DOJ attorneys are being deployed to aid and abet in lawbreaking. Like just yesterday, Madam Attorney General, when the administration took, I believe, the unprecedented step of suing all the Maryland Federal District Court judges because of actions they took to protect habeas corpus and the constitutional right of due process. To date, the administration has faced nearly 300 legal challenges in federal courts. There are currently in place a huge number of preliminary injunctions and temporary restraining orders issued by judges appointed by presidents of both parties, including appointed by President Trump. At the same time, patriotic career civil servants have been fired for upholding their constitutional oaths. In January, the then acting Attorney General fired more than a dozen prosecutors simply because they had been assigned to work with Special Counsel Jack Smith. And dozens of others have also been wrongfully terminated. And you picked up where the acting Attorney General left off when you fired the pardon attorney after she declined to restore the gun rights to a close friend of President Trump with a domestic violence conviction. Perhaps most troubling, Madam Attorney General, is you have fired attorneys like the acting Deputy Director of the Office of Immigration Litigation simply for telling the truth in court. As he said yesterday, the whistleblower, in a complaint filed, quote, "I didn't sign up to lie." That sends a terrible message to every DOJ attorney who wants to both do their job and uphold their professional ethics and integrity. While spending taxpayer resources to defend this lawbreaking, the administration has proposed a budget that is a gift to our foreign adversaries, to the drug cartels, and to illegal firearms traffickers. Why do I say that? Let's look at each of those categories. On your first day, you disbanded the FBI Foreign Influence Task Force Office, which was established to combat secret malign influence campaigns by China, Russia, and other adversaries. On that day, you also restricted the scope of criminal charges under the Foreign Agents Registration Act. Your budget cuts the Drug Enforcement Administration and eliminates funding for the organized crime drug enforcement task forces, which coordinate interagency efforts to combat the worst drug trafficking cartels. And you're effectively dismantling efforts to go after illegal gun traffickers by attempting to dissolve the ATF. At the same time, this budget undermines local law enforcement by stripping away funding that's critical to protecting our local schools and reducing violent crime in rural communities. And many organizations that help the victims of crimes are running out of their fiscal year 25 funds because, for example, the Office of Justice Programs has only posted one grant solicitation for 2025. Meanwhile, under the guise of efficiency, your budget proposes to combine and significantly cut the 3 distinct DOJ grant-making agencies, including the Office on Violence Against Women, which you propose to slash by 30%. There is nothing efficient about reducing services to victims of crime. Your budget also indicates that transparency and integrity are not priorities of the Justice Department. Over the last 5 months, you've decimated the public integrity section. Public reports indicate that this office went from 30 attorneys to as few as 5. Your budget would also slash the department's oversight watchdog, the Office of Inspector General, by $42 million. Inspector General Horowitz told me that these cuts would result in the elimination of 140 positions, which would bring investigations to a halt and interfere with the IG's ability to conduct oversight of the department. I would note that it was an OIG investigation that helped uncover the FBI's serious mishandling of allegations of sexual abuse against former USA gymnastics physician Larry Nassar. Why target these key areas of public integrity, oversight, and accountability? So, Attorney General Bondi, I hope you'll answer our questions today. I say that because your department has failed to respond to any of the 9 inquiries I have made and have responded to only 2 of 38 letters sent by my colleagues, the ranking members of the Senate and House Judiciary Committees, Senator Durbin and Congressman Raskin. So, Madam Attorney General, we have much to discuss this morning. I look forward to your testimony.
Senator Van Hollen, thank you. General Bondi, you're now recognized for your statement.
Good afternoon. Good morning. Good morning. Chairman Moran, Chairwoman Collins, Ranking Member Murray, Ranking Member Van Hollen, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. I'm honored to appear before you today to present the President's fiscal year 2026 budget for DOJ. I look forward to working with you to ensure continued support for the department and our many critical missions. President Trump's 2026 budget proposal takes $34 billion for the Department of Justice. The money will support federal law enforcement as well as our state, local, and tribal law enforcement partners. My primary objective as Attorney General is to return the department to its core mission of keeping Americans safe and vigorously enforcing the law. This budget will allow us to continue to do just that. Since January 20th, we have dismantled deadly fentanyl networks across our nation. We prosecuted MS-13 and TDA members using terrorism and RICO charges. We've seized thousands of illegal guns from cartels and extradited key cartel leaders into U.S. prisons. Last month, the FBI arrested 205 child predators in one single operation, and the DEA executed the largest fentanyl bust in the history of our country across 4 states. We've also surged FBI resources to investigate thousands of violent crime committed against American Indian and Alaska Native people. These are just a few examples of what we've achieved just thus far in such a short time. This budget will allow us to continue our crucial work. We've also led the charge to enforce our immigration laws, rebuild our immigration system after 4 years of chaos, and help secure our nation's borders. We must guarantee that our laws allow us to process, hold, and remove those who enter our country illegally. Our U.S. attorneys continue to effectively work with law enforcement at all levels to investigate and prosecute the increasing volume of immigration-related criminal offenses. Additionally, the President and I have established and reinvigorated 3 task forces to enforce the administration's priority. Homeland Security Task Force is enhancing federal and state local law enforcement throughout our country. Joint Task Force Alpha will continue to specifically target human trafficking and human smuggling networks that took root while our border was wide open, Senator Van Hollen. And Joint Task Force Vulcan will continue successful efforts to arrest and prosecute members of TDA and MS-13. We are also committed to making America safe again by reducing recidivism. The Bureau of Prisons has suffered years of mismanagement, lack of funding, and low morale. Throughout my confirmation process, BOP came up in every single meeting, regardless of party affiliation. The President's budget proposal will address critical staffing shortages, enhance staff retention, and deliver positive changes to a system that has long needed improvements. The resources made available through President Trump's proposal will also empower the department to continue fighting our war on fentanyl. Since January 2025, DEA has seized 41.5 million fentanyl pills and 4,470 kilos of fentanyl powder. It's a historic rate, but it's not enough. We won't rest until this poison is off our streets. And finally, the budget continues my commitment to find savings in the department, reduce inefficiencies, and deliver value to the American taxpayer. In 2026, the department will merge components that work in overlapping areas and make our law enforcement and our grant-making efforts more effective. We'll emerge from this as a leaner organization, better equipped to make American people safe from threats at home and abroad. Chairman Moran, Chairman Collins, Chairwoman Collins, Ranking Member Murray, Ranking Member Van Hollen, it is my pleasure to highlight our efforts and be good stewards of our resources. I'm working diligently to restore confidence and integrity to the department and each of its components. Thank you for your continued support of the department's financial needs and the opportunity to present our budget request. I look forward to working with you, and I'm happy to take any questions you might have.
General Bondi, thank you very much for your testimony. I would now recognize Senator Collins, the chairwoman of the full committee.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I very much appreciate your leadership of this important subcommittee. Welcome, Attorney General Bondi. It's good to see you. Just yesterday, I met in my office with the advocates who work with survivors of domestic violence in rural Maine. Along with Chairman Moran and other members of this committee, I was one of the lead sponsors of the Violence Against Women Act reauthorization of 2022. The programs authorized by this law are critical to reducing violence against women, ensuring that justice is administered, and strengthening services to victims and survivors of domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, and stalking. Despite the vital need of these programs, the department's budget request proposes to reduce funding for the Office on Violence Against Women from approximately $713 million in fiscal year 2025 to $505 million in fiscal year 2026. That's a reduction of nearly 30%. And the reductions include cuts to transitional housing assistance, the Sexual Assault Services Program, the Rural Victims Program, which I heard a lot about yesterday, and many others. Attorney General Bondi, I know that you care deeply about this issue, as do I. So why is the department cutting funding to combat domestic violence, dating violence, sexual assault, stalking, and support of survivors? Was this cut imposed upon the department by the Office of Management and Budget?
Thank you, Senator Collins. When I began as a prosecutor, I started in the domestic violence unit. And I say it's more frightening to prosecute a domestic violence case than a homicide, because you never know the next day what will happen. We used to wake up and read the newspapers in the morning, that was before cell phones, to see if someone had been injured or hurt or killed who came in and recanted from a domestic violence incident. So it's very personally important to me as well. And we also know that many homicides are the result of domestic violence. This budget includes $505 million to prevent and respond to violence against women, including $190 million for grants to combat violence against women, STOP. And it also gives $60 million for sexual assault services. This budget is a compromise. It's a leaner budget. We can always do more with more, but we can do more with less. And you have my word that we will do everything in our power to fight for victims of domestic violence throughout this country, as I have done my entire career, Senator.
I do know and acknowledge that you care deeply about these issues, as do I. I hope we can work together to get to a better place on the budget, because I am convinced from talking with advocacy groups and with survivors themselves that we need to do more, and that oftentimes rural areas of America just don't have the services, and that's why I wanted to bring it up as my first issue with you.
May I respond to that briefly? And yeah, about the rural issues, I didn't realize that until I became United States Attorney General and met with you, met with Senator Murkowski. The rural areas, because Florida is so highly populated, the state in which I come from, and learning that is so true. And not only that, the tribal areas have an extremely high level of domestic violence. So I'm committed to working with you and every state on all of those issues and fighting domestic violence and sexual violence across this country. And thank you, Senator Collins.
Thank you. Let me turn to just one other issue. It's one that we discussed prior to your confirmation, in which I described to you a very serious problem in Maine, Oklahoma, and some other states, and that is the proliferation of illegal marijuana growing operations that are connected to transnational Chinese criminal organizations. When I raised this issue with the FBI director before this subcommittee in May, he testified that the FBI planned to direct more resources to the field in Maine and to increase intelligence collection in DC to target these illegal grow operations that are producing tainted marijuana, that are destroying the houses in which these grow operations occur, and I'm convinced are involved in human trafficking as well, because who would want to work in a grow operation with black mold and other dangerous substances everywhere? I'm also convinced from some of the charges, and there has been an improvement with this administration over the previous ones, that money laundering is occurring and that it is likely linked to the fentanyl trade as well. Could you provide me with an update on the deployment of federal resources so that our sheriffs, which have led the way, and our state and local law enforcement in Maine get the help that they need? I will say the IRS criminal investigation and FinCENT at Treasury have been helpful, but we do need more help from the Justice Department.
Senator, thank you. First, to the issue regarding the Chinese marijuana growers. One of the first things I did was meet with Director Patel about that. I met with DEA about that and ATF about that, because it all goes together, as we discussed. I thought you were going to receive a briefing on that. If not, we will make sure you receive one in a classified setting. But I can tell you that we are directly involved in many of those cases. We are looking at that closely, and we will continue to fight that and research that. And that was something else that I learned about in Maine from my very first meeting with you, but we have had multiple discussions about it, and there are active, ongoing investigations regarding that issue. As to fentanyl, we will continue to combat fentanyl. You know, fentanyl first came on the market when I was a state attorney general. And I fought my own party to get tougher legislation on fentanyl because people thought it was something you get in the hospital. It's apples and oranges. It is completely different. And as you're well aware, the precursors are made in China and they are shipped into our country. They were for the last 4 years flowing right across through our Mexican border, no longer. But DEA, FBI, all of our agencies are committed to eradicating fentanyl and other lethal drugs. Get this poison off our streets. Kids don't know they're taking it. They're overdosing every day. But the Department of Justice has, to combat the drug epidemic, $10.1 billion, DEA $3.1 billion, total positions 31,776, trial attorneys over 1,000, total agents almost 7,000, DEA agents almost 5,000. We have had many key successes with the DEA, including Salazar Amaya and others for trafficking millions of fentanyl pills into our country. March 7th, Gonzalez, a Mexican dual citizen from CJNG, trafficking fentanyl. Just constant fentanyl cases we've been making, and we've been doing it with limited resources, but consolidation of resources and getting our agents back on the street to keep Americans safe. And Senator, that is my primary focus as Attorney General.
Thank you, and I look forward to having that briefing. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Senator Van Hollen is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Madam Attorney General, yesterday, Erez Ruveni filed a whistleblower complaint against the Department of Justice. As I think you know, he was a 15-year veteran of the Department of Justice. He received commendations during the first Trump administration for all his work at DOJ, but he filed a detailed account of his recent experience at the Department of Justice, saying that prior to his determination, that he was terminated after he refused to sign an appeal brief that was unsupported by evidence or the law. And he says, "I didn't sign up to lie." In response to his termination, you made a statement on Fox News a little while ago saying, "At my direction, every Department of Justice attorney is required to zealously advocate on behalf of the United States, and that any attorney who fails to abide by this direction will face consequences." So, General Bondi, I guess the direct question is, he says he was fired because he didn't want to make an untruthful statement to a court of law. I have two questions. Number one, I assume you agree that zealous advocacy does not mean telling untruths to courts of law. And second, if that's not the case, what did you mean by saying he was not a zealous advocate?
Senator Van Hollen, this is all pending litigation, as you're well aware, and the timing of it, I can't discuss pending litigation. This is a whistleblower lawsuit pending within my office, but I will say the timing of it I find suspect, as he takes hits at Emil Bovey, who is one of the best human beings I know, one of the smartest, brilliant men I know, who will soon become a federal judge. And his hearing happens to be today, and I find the irony of the timing of it pretty remarkable, the lawsuit. But this had to do with attorney-client privilege information that was disclosed. I can't talk about the substance, but what I will tell you, and you have obviously my word, any zealous advocacy means to be done ethically and honestly, always. And that's what I mean by zealous advocacy. He also accused Emil Bovey of things that Todd Blanche, who is one of the best human beings I also know, my Deputy Attorney General, was in the room and said did not happen. But again, I wish I could get into greater detail. I can't because it's pending. But I stand by Emil Bovey and I stand by Todd Blanche every day, and I always will.
Well, Madam Attorney General, I will say that his account seems to have lots of information. So as you say, this will obviously be something that's litigated or reviewed through due process procedures. But I have to say that it's very, very disturbing. We've also heard from others in other departments who are responsible for implementing the laws of the United States that they feel uncomfortable about having been asked to do things that they thought were unethical. Let me go on to some of the budget questions, and I really want to follow up on my colleagues, Senator Moran and Senator Collins. But the DOJ grant funding is being sort of cut back on two fronts. One, in April, the department terminated hundreds of grant awards, notifying grantees that their current grant funds were gone, effective immediately. That included, law enforcement training grants, technical assistance awards, some dating back to fiscal year, I think, 2017. So, question number one is, are you going to be releasing those funds? The second concern regarding grants has to do with the monies that were appropriated in this fiscal year, in March. And my understanding is that DOJ is withholding an overwhelming number of notices of funding opportunities, NOFOs, meaning that grantees who rely on these grants, including many who provide services to victims of crimes, are literally, in some cases, running out of money. For example, the department's biggest grant-making component, the Office of Justice Programs, has only posted one notice for fiscal year 25, NOFO notice. So if you could answer the question with respect to both those pieces.
Sure, and that's a very valid question, Senator. The notices will be going out in coming weeks about the grants. And we did cut grants by 6%, and I'm here to tell every senator, if we did cut a grant that you care about that is specific to your state, please contact me. I've turned on grants that were cut off. So please, if that happens, there's an appeal process, but you can pick up the phone and you can call me, and I would be more than happy to look at that. I never want to take away a grant that is actually helping Americans, helping victims, helping law enforcement, and we're looking at it on a case-by-case basis, and many of those are being appealed already, but you have my word, we will look at all of those, absolutely.
Thank you. And in terms of the other piece of the question, when the notices for information will go out, because the fiscal year obviously is, running out, and we are hearing from lots of entities that are waiting for those notices so they can apply for the grant funding.
Yeah, yes, Senator. The notice of funding is consistent with our priorities, and they're finalizing it right now. It will be going out very shortly.
Very shortly. All right. Thank you. If you
Oh, it'll be posted on a rolling basis, too, I believe.
Okay. If you could just keep us posted on that. And I would appreciate it, Madam Attorney General, if you could have your team or respond to a letter that about 30 senators wrote to you on this topic of the prior fiscal year funds that were frozen.
I will make sure they look at that letter. I think we've received probably thousands of
You've got
letters.
lots of letters. But we really do need, in order to do our job, to get responses. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Attorney General, in the last 72 hours, senior officials at the Department of Justice and the FBI have issued warnings about the possibility of Iran or its supporters retaliating on American soil. I'm concerned by these threats, particularly to Jewish communities and facilities. I appreciate that the department is taking this seriously, and the FBI appears to be taking these threats. Particularly, I'm concerned after one of our own state citizens, Kansan Sarah Milgram, was murdered by an anti-Israel activist here in Washington, D.C. My question is, General Bondi, is I recognize that a full assessment of these threats is probably better in a classified setting, but would you describe for the committee today, can you tell us what you can about specific actions the FBI and the DOJ law enforcement components are taking to mitigate these threats?
Thank you, Senator Moran. And I spoke with Sarah's family in Kansas.
Thank you.
I also spoke with the young man's family in Israel. I went to the scene of that crime, as I've done countless times as a homicide prosecutor in my career. I never dreamed that I would do that again. And it was truly horrific. They were simply leaving an event, as you well know, at a museum. And Ambassador Leiter actually told me that night that it's come out since publicly that he had a ring and was planning on proposing to her the following week in Israel. It was horrific. Not only that, what happened at Governor Shapiro's house in Pennsylvania was absolutely disgusting. I've spoken to Governor Shapiro multiple times, and that person will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. That was a hate crime. I believe it was done during Shabbat. To terrorize Governor Shapiro, pending criminal case, so I don't want to get into it too much, but I think that's been public information. Also, what happened in Boulder, Colorado, what happened at a Holocaust survivor, a woman who survived the Holocaust was hit by a firebomb with someone simply because she's Jewish, and many others were injured. Also, there's a cafe in this country called Jerusalem Cafe. My civil rights division is all over that. They will not serve you if you have a Jewish star. They have coffees and teas with despicable names that are anti-Semitic. My civil rights division is going after them with full force. So not only from a civil rights perspective, but from a national security perspective. My national security division, one of my top lawyers is sitting behind me here today. We are all over these cases, working hand in hand with FBI, with Homeland Security. All of our agencies are working so well together to try to combat this throughout our country. And without getting into detail in this setting, Iran, of course, is a threat. They have been a threat, and they always will be a threat to our country. And we are working hand in hand with all of our agencies to protect Americans and to keep us safe. We have a 24/7 command center at the FBI set up for situations just like you described, Senator.
Thank you for your vehement response about the importance of protecting all Americans, and particularly those who are singled out because of their heritage or religion. There are a number of grant programs at DOJ that might be valuable. The precipitous increase in crime program is available to surge resources under the Burn Justice Assistant Grant Program. And I'm looking at ways that we can help further protect synagogues and other religious places in our country from this kind of terror and violence. let me switch topics, although not unrelated. I've taken a particular interest in trying to make sure that judges, the federal court of our country is protected. And we've seen too many circumstances in which a judge or a judge's family has been harmed. The United States Marshal Service plays a critical role in ensuring that federal judges and their families are safe and secure. In this context of this elevated threat environment that there's evidence of, I'm pleased that the budget is proposing an increase of $30 million in marshal salaries and expense account. That increase, however, is dedicated to the proposal to migrate Interpol Washington into the Marshal Service. General Bondi, would you support additional resources for the marshals to ensure that they can execute their judicial security responsibilities?
Yes, and to back up a minute, when you said about protecting our Jewish friends throughout the country, we are also protecting mosque. We are protecting all religions throughout our country. I just didn't want
I appreciate you making
to miss
the
that point.
clarification, and we wouldn't signal out any particular religious individuals or institutions. We want all Americans to be safe and secure.
Yes, Senator. And Todd Blanche, my Deputy Attorney General, has a meeting set with the Sergeant of Arms here to be sure that all of you are protected as well as our judges. Our new U.S. Marshal, his name is Gadi Serralta, and he is remarkable. He is a Floridian, so I'm a little biased. He's from Miami, and he has been a long-standing U.S. Marshal, and he is going to do everything in his power to keep all of our judges safe, and we'll work hand in hand with all of you on that. But this has nothing to do with political party. This has to do with keeping Americans safe, keeping our lawmakers safe, keeping our judges safe, where our judges feel like they can go home at night and be safe and not have to worry, and all of our governors and all of the lawmakers in Minnesota throughout this country. I spoke to Keith Ellison after Minnesota. I spoke to Senator Klobuchar after Minnesota. And in that case, our U.S. attorney on the ground there is working hand in hand with the district attorney. That's what I've done my entire career, and that's what they will continue to do. The federal, state, and local authorities will work hand in hand. Our budget includes $190 million, Senator, for judicial security, including 303 deputy U.S. Marshals.
I'm pleased to hear that you're aware and supportive of those efforts. I would highlight for you that under the Daniel Andrew Act, we are working to have the personal information of judges removed from the internet, from public circumstances, including the addresses and names of their children. Senate Bill FY 25, our Senate bill funded that program at $10 million, and I'm hopeful this subcommittee and the Department of Justice can continue to find ways to support that effort to further protect our judges and their families.
Senator, not only our judges, but all of you as well need to be protected in the world in which we live.
Thank you. Senator Peters. Senator Peters is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Attorney General Bondi, good to have you here. Welcome to the committee. General Bondi, leadership at DHS has claimed that ICE and others who are carrying out immigration enforcement activities and support are covering their faces to protect themselves from being doxxed. And certainly I fully understand those concerns, and I appreciate those concerns, and I think they're real concerns. But I'm deeply concerned that the lack of identification during these activities is dangerous, both to the public as well as to the officers themselves. The public risks being harmed by individuals pretending to be immigration enforcement, which has already happened. We've seen that happen. And these officers also risk being injured by individuals who think they're basically being kidnapped or attacked by some unknown assailant. So my question for you, Attorney General Bondi, is given the number of DOJ employees currently conducting immigration enforcement activities in support of DHS, how are you going to ensure that the safety of the public and the officers, if they continue to not follow required protocol to identify themselves as law enforcement?
And Senator Peters, that's the first time that issue has come to me about them you're saying that law enforcement officers, when they cover their faces.
Right.
I do know they are being doxxed, as you said. They're being threatened. Their families are being threatened. You know,
Again, I get that, but they have to identify themselves. There is an insignia oftentimes. They have to identify themselves as law enforcement. People think, here's a person coming up to me, not identified, covering themselves. They're kidnapping. They'll probably fight back. That endangers the officer as well. And that's a serious situation. People need to know that they're dealing with a federal law enforcement official.
Senator, I would be happy to look at that issue with you and talk to all of our partner law enforcement agencies, but I can assure you that if they're covering their faces now, it's to protect themselves. But they also want to protect all citizens, and that's something we can work together on to ensure the safety of everyone and their families.
Yeah. And it's protecting themselves, too, if they identify themselves. It's not just the person, because someone's going to fight back if you just think a strange person with their face covered
It sounds
throwing
like
you into a van. Most people will resist that.
It sounds like you have a specific case, and I would
We will have
happy
those.
to talk to you about that at a later time, because I'm not aware of that happening, but I'd be happy to talk to you about that.
We'd be happy to do it. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Earlier this month, the administration announced it was launching an effort to ramp up immigration apprehensions by shifting more than 5,000 personnel from across federal law enforcement, including approximately 2,000 from within the Justice Department, away from their typical duties to focus on immigration-related cases, including targeting individuals whose status had been terminated by this administration. This effort is on top of previous directives for department officials to focus on immigration enforcement. Many of these officials impacted by these directives, unsurprisingly, say they're being forced to turn their attention away from other national security missions, including counterterrorism and cyber security. There has been public reporting that hundreds of FBI agents have been reassigned to immigration-related duties, and raising real concerns among agents themselves that the shift could hinder investigations into terror threats and espionage by China and Russia. And we have also heard concerns about resources being reoriented at the state and local level. Attorney General Bondi, I know the Justice Department officials have said that this president can walk and chew gum at the same time, and that you continue to hold all criminals accountable regardless of immigration status. But numerous reports on the ground from career government officials and some basic common sense would beg to differ. Given the attacks on Iran over the weekend, this issue has become even more salient, with threats from terrorists inspired by Iran, cyber attacks, often by Iran itself, or additional efforts by that regime to go after government leaders. So my question is, how are you ensuring that there are enough resources focused on the full range of national security threats, and there's no shortage of those, when so many of our DOJ resources are being reallocated to immigration enforcement?
I talk to Director Patel or Deputy Director Bongino 7 days a week. I speak to my National Security Division. We meet every single day. Emil Bovey, who's currently with us, is doing an incredible job in the national security space as well, helping us. We are doing everything. We are using our resources on all fronts. And when you say immigration, immigration is going hand in hand with the people who have come into our country through our borders. I think just over 1,500 illegal aliens from Iran are here. Chinese individuals, Russian individuals, people from every country. That goes hand in hand with immigration, identifying them, finding them, and getting them out of our country. Will national security be compromised? Not at all, Senator. It will be increased. It will be enhanced. I can tell you, every day we talk about this, multiple times a day, 7 days a week, as to what we can do, working hand in hand with DEA, ATF agents, FBI, Homeland Security, ICE, to make sure that our nation is safe. And FBI, they have a 24/7 center set up now. And actually, we've set some up around the country. And you're welcome to actually come see one if you would like anytime. I would love to have you come in and see what we do. But we have that set up around our country on a national security level to be sure Americans are safe, and do everything we can to get terrorists who are in our country out of our country.
Well, certainly, I don't disagree with any of that. That do obviously criminal elements that are there need to be taken care of. But you're also looking at cybersecurity, which is different. You're looking at counterterrorism issues that are different. And I don't believe that we were over-resourced in those areas. You may beg to differ. So they were not over-resourced. We were making sure that they had the resources to deal with the other threats. But now those people are being pulled off of those jobs for another job. I just want to make sure that we're still doing things necessary to protect us from cyber threats, counterterrorism, and the long list of other threats that we face every day.
Thank you for those questions, and I know your background, and that's why it's so important to all of us. And yes, we are, and cybersecurity, I could go on for 2 hours about cybersecurity and what's happening. Not only that, the online child predators online, but the foreign terrorist threats through cybersecurity that we can talk about in a different setting. I'd be happy to discuss all of that with you and our efforts, not only made within our country, but with our partners worldwide.
Well, I'll look forward to having that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you,
Mr. Chairman.
Senator.
Thank you, Senator Peters. Senator Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Attorney General, I think you're doing a fantastic job. I want to say that to you and to your team.
Thank you.
And kind of lay out sort of where I think we're going here. The threat level to this country is pretty high. Do you agree?
Yes, Senator.
Every time I turn around, there seems to be a new threat coming our way, and we're just going to have to meet the moment, and I think we will. So one thing I want you to reconsider is I think there was some termination of protective details for people that were targeted for assassination by the Iranians because of the role they played in the first term. Pompeo, Secretary Pompeo, and others. I'd urge you to reconsider that, sit down with the intel folks, because I think the threat level is pretty high, and that's just something for you to take back. I think Iran does want to hurt our country. Now, back to lawlessness, that was mentioned. Can you very briefly give me the scope of the problem you've had to deal with just on illegal immigration? Yeah, I think, yeah.
The drugs.
Enormous.
The drugs, the guns, the terrorists coming into our country. I just say this because it's relevant to where we're sitting. 20 minutes away, we arrested one of the highest level members of one of the biggest gangs in the country living in Virginia. And that was through a task force that we set up with Governor Youngkin, with state, local, and federal law enforcement agencies working together.
Would you say it's been a big mountain and you're climbing it?
It's been a monument. It's been Mount Everest.
Okay.
It is monumental. It is
So
monumental.
let us help you climb Mount Everest. Mr. Hallman said that if we don't get more money into the system, we're going to hit a wall in terms of the president's promise to deport people that shouldn't be here and represent a danger. Do you agree with that, that ICE needs more funding?
Always, yes.
Okay. So reconciliation is on the way, but I just want everybody to understand, you support the president's border security budget.
I do, and Senator, the big beautiful bill gives $500 million to us, to Department of Justice, to combat drug trafficking.
Well, we're going to start the big beautiful bill, and we ain't leaving town.
$600 million for prosecute immigration matters, which are really all the issues that Senator Peters had discussed with me, and $950 million to reimburse non-sanctuary states and locals for cost that they've incurred, and $1.25 billion for other immigration issues. And I would urge everyone to support the Senate's version, which is much greater for Department of Justice than the House's version of one big beautiful bill. And I think that goes back to what Senator Van Hollen was discussing too, increasing our public safety, as well as you, Senator Moran. So thank you all for that. Thank you, Senator Graham.
As the Senate Budget Chairman, I think I will support our
Thank
version
you.
of it. And I think it's needed, I'm not be joking about it. I think it's very much needed. The budget you propose will be reworked. Do you understand that we have a say in this, right?
Yes.
Okay. If we give you more money, do you think you could use it wisely?
We will always be a good
'Cause you're
steward
gonna
of
get
your
more
money.
money.
We will put law enforcement officers on the street.
This whole
not sitting
DA
behind
thing,
desks.
I don't know who's thinking about that, but that just makes like 0 sense to me. We'd want to be cutting the DA now and putting ATF over the DA. So we'll agree to disagree, and I just think you're doing a great job, but that's the way our system works. We may have a different view of things, and we'll work together. I trust your judgment very, very much so. Is Mexico helping us with the drug problem?
Senator, that might be a conversation to better have in a classified setting.
Okay, well, here's what I want to say publicly. No, you're not. You need to, half your country is run by the cartels. We're never going to be safe here until we get Mexico to change their game. I'll be glad to talk to you in a private session, but enough with Mexico. You need to up your game.
The Sinaloa cartels have wreaked havoc on our country, and they continue to wreak havoc on our country.
Enough of that crap.
And the fentanyl coming in.
Yeah, we're coming after them with Mexico's help or without their help, because I don't know what the right response is to a neighbor that allows this kind of lawlessness to come into our country and kill more young people than any other method. More people dying from fentanyl poisoning coming from Mexico than anything else. And, that just needs to stop very quickly. Back to Iran. They have sleeper cells, we think, here?
We have thus far arrested 1,500 illegal Iranians in our country. That is something that I would like to talk about in a classified setting.
So
but yes, have they invaded our country? Yeah. Absolutely.
You said Iran's a threat to America. When people chant death to America, that's kind of a tip-off they're a threat to our country, right?
And to our Jewish population, yes.
Well, to all of us. And when they swore in the recent president in July of last year, during the swearing in of the president of Iran, they were chanting death to America. So that kind of tells me where they're coming from. I guess the point I'm trying to make is Iran is threatening us in many, many ways. I do not want to live my life or our country's life giving in to bullies and religious Nazis. We're coming after your regime to change it. Nobody wants regime change for the sake of regime change. I want the regime to change its behavior. I want them to stop the policy of killing all the Jews in Israel, reject that policy. I want them to be better neighbors for the world at large. I want them to change their behavior. And if you don't want them to change their behavior, that's weird, because they kill their own people. They're hanging people in squares today. They're very oppressive. They're very brutal. They've been trying to build a nuclear weapon, and they want to use it against the people of Israel and us. So my last point is, when it comes to Iran, can you say to the Iranian regime, you will not intimidate us to do what's best to help Israel in our own national security? We're not going to be intimidated.
I think Donald Trump has said that loud and clear. We will not be intimidated, and we will keep America safe thanks to the leadership of President Trump, not only from Iran, but from Russia, from China, and from Mexico, from any foreign adversary, whether they're trying to kill us physically or by overdosing our children with drugs. We're going to do everything in our power, thanks to his leadership, to keep America safe.
Outstanding. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We're joined by the Vice Chairman of the full committee. Senator Murray is recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Attorney General Bondi, we are in a deeply alarming moment where law and order is being replaced by chaos and corruption and really whatever Trump wants. And your department's independence and its capacity to do its job have eroded before our eyes. We have seen respected career officials who've been fired for doing their job. Thousands more are being pushed out with your buyouts and the threat of mass firings, and entire divisions are being eliminated, and grants have been canceled illegally. So I have questions about how and why those decisions are being made, and importantly, whether you're adequately resourcing DOJ to do its job. But before I turn to my questions, I do want to raise my alarm about the troubling pattern of trampling basic rights. Detainees, including U.S. citizens, being shipped overseas without any due process. Elected officials are detained for conducting oversight, and a U.S. senator gets tackled to the ground for asking questions at a press conference. This is not the country I know or the values I believe in, and I hope that colleagues on both sides of the aisle will agree with that. Now, to the questions. Yesterday, and I know that Senator Van Hollen raised this issue, a former DOJ attorney filed a protected whistleblower complaint accusing Deputy AG Emil Bove and senior DOJ leadership of defying court orders, including through, quote, lack of candor, deliberate delay, and disinformation, unquote. The complaint also accuses this administration of firing the whistleblower for, quote, telling the truth to the court. These allegations are deeply concerning. Now, I know you said that you can't discuss the case, but can you confirm that you agree that this administration should follow court orders?
We will follow court orders, Senator. The entire administration will follow court orders. The problem arises in the district courts. All
Okay.
these district
I'm
courts
not
throughout
asking
the
about the
country
district
are
courts, but- I have
tying our
limited time.
hands.
Can
But
you
here's how we will follow them when we get
Attorney
to the
General,
United
this is-
Supreme Court.
I need to ask
we're
you a
winning.
number of questions.
And so,
I
yes,
know
we're
you want to
following the
filibuster,
orders
but
of
let
the
me
court.
ask my questions. Can you confirm you will not allow any conduct like what is alleged to continue at the DOJ?
I'm not going to talk about anything that's alleged. What I will talk about with you,
Well,
hold on, you asked me a question and I get to answer it. What you asked me, alleged conduct that's part of a pending whistleblower lawsuit that was filed on the eve prior to Emil Bove's hearing today.
I'm
which
not
seems
asking
highly
about that case
suspicious. Hold on,
specifically.
let me keep going.
Attorney
I would
General
run
Bondi,
through a
this
wall
is
for
my
Emil
time,
Bove
Mr. Chairman,
and
I
Todd
would like to
Blanche.
continue with my questions. I have very limited time. Thank you. I just want you to confirm for this you will not allow conduct like that at the DOJ. Yes or no?
I will always support and defend Emil Bove, and I will defend Todd Blanche. They are two of the finest people I know and two
I
of
was
the
asking
ethical
about the
people
conduct.
I know.
Let me keep going here. Now, in April, DOJ abruptly terminated over 300 public safety grants that had already gone through a very rigorous and fair and apolitical application process with no explanation. This is funding to investigate and prosecute drug trafficking, to support foster care kids who experienced abuse or neglect, to expand access to forensic exams to prosecute violent crimes like sexual assault. These really senseless cancellations have already forced public safety organizations to cut employees and services. So when I want to ask you, when you cut off the community-based violence intervention and prevention initiative funding, were you aware it is used to prevent and reduce violent crime?
Yeah, Senator, you weren't here for that, so I'm going to have to repeat myself. We have cut grants. I think we've cut 6%. But if we have cut a grant that you feel should not be cut, please reach out to me. I will personally look at it. We've turned multiple grants back on. Okay. We have an appeal process. But if you want to come to me directly, I would be happy to sit down with you and look at that and help you.
I'm happy. I appreciate
Again, we're doing everything we can.
Okay, but let me just ask you, when you cut off the expanding access to sexual assault forensic examination grant, were you aware that that grant helps our authorities prosecute rape and sexual assault?
I have no idea about that specific grant you're talking about. That's why I said if you want to come sit down with me, I would never cut a grant intentionally that has anything to do.
Those recipients on the other end across the country.
Can you give me the details of that grant?
I can absolutely do that, and my staff will get that to you. But those are two critical ones that I just wanted to ask you about today.
Again, we've turned many grants back on, and we'll continue to. If you want to call me, and we can discuss them with you.
Okay, in your budget request, you propose consolidating the Office on Violence Against Women into the Office of Justice Programs. In 2002, Congress actually codified the office as a permanent, separate, and independent office to implement the Violence Against Women Act. We did that to make sure that violent crimes against women receive the necessary attention, expertise, and resources, and to give the office a strong, independent voice within the Justice Department and federal government. Now your department wants to fade that into the OJP, which violates the intent of the law that we passed. It makes grant programs less effective, and it places a lot more barriers for victims and services they need. And I see that you're cutting the office's resources by about a third. So will you commit to us, the Appropriations Committee, to follow the law and maintain OVW as a separate grant entity?
I will follow the law, but I will not keep that as a separate grant entity. You and I can disagree all day long on what the law is.
Well,
That's being consolidated into the Office of Justice Programs.
so for
I'm
your-
not going to cut, let me answer, I'm not going to cut anything that's going to hurt violence against
Not
women.
my question.
It will
I'm
eliminate
asking, just for your information, Attorney General, in 2002, we codified the office as a permanent, separate, and independent office. So that you need to go back and take a look at that. I know my time is out, but I thank you very much for the time.
Senator Kennedy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. General, when you took over the Department of Justice and started going through all of the grants under your predecessor, did you find any that, in your opinion, constituted a waste of taxpayer money?
Yes, Senator. I don't have those specifically in front of me, but yes, Senator, there were many, and we are now going through those grants one by one. We are going through each of those grants because at the Department of Justice, we have a very obviously unique function in public safety. I will never let a grant be cut that's hurting women, victims of sexual assault, children, law enforcement officers. So we will look at those, each grant individually, to see what is fluff, what is DEI, no longer at the Department of Justice, and what are viable grants. And that money will go where it should go, to protect victims of crime and our law enforcement officers.
That's your job, isn't it?
Yes, Senator.
Okay. And you're doing that because it's your job.
Yes,
Right.
Senator.
Okay. Some people say that you're being overly mean and unfair to foreign nationals who are in our country illegally. Would you care to address that?
I don't think I've been called mean recently, but
Oh, you've been called worse.
I was going to say probably a lot worse.
Yeah.
We will do everything in our power to get the illegal aliens out of our country who are committing crimes in our country. I have met with way too many family members who are parents, mothers, whose children have been murdered and raped by illegal aliens in our country. If that's mean, then I want to be as mean as I can be.
Well, I mean,
because we're going to get them out of our country and we're going to protect Americans.
We can agree, can we not, that legal immigration is legal,
Absolutely.
okay? And we can agree, can we not, that illegal immigration is illegal,
Yes, Senator.
okay? If you don't like the statutes with respect to illegal immigration, you can change them. But if you enforce them, as Congress has directed you to do, you're not being mean, you're just doing your job, aren't you?
Yes, Senator.
Okay. When you prosecute someone who's in our country illegally, not necessarily for a criminal matter, but just to enforce our immigration laws, are you careful to afford them due process?
Yes, Senator.
Okay. And would you consider that to be one of your priorities in terms of enforcing the laws against illegal foreign nationals?
Yes, Senator. I've been in a courtroom my entire career, and due process will be afforded.
Okay.
And the laws of this country will be enforced.
Could it be that some of the people who are criticizing you simply think that illegal immigration shouldn't be illegal?
Absolutely. Absolutely. But we will protect Americans. We will protect American families. We will protect these mothers of lost children who are murdered by illegal aliens. We will protect the widow of the trooper who was run down by an illegal alien and left a baby at
Let me stop you a second,
home.
General. I'm going to run out of time. Could it be that some of the people who are criticizing you, saying you're mean and otherwise for enforcing the law, believe that that the board, we should have open borders. They believe that anyone should be able to come into and out of the United States whenever they want to. Could that be the motivation for them?
It could be, Senator.
Could it be that some of the people who are opposed to you think that by just allowing everybody to come into our country who wants to could help them in terms of winning elections? Could that be part of their motivation?
Well, Donald Trump won by an overwhelming majority. He won the electoral and the popular vote by an overwhelming majority, and he made it crystal clear to all Americans that he was going to close our borders and keep Americans safe. So they're running on the wrong platform.
That's what the law requires, right?
That's the law.
And you're just enforcing the law, is that right?
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
I will continue to.
Senator Reid.
Chairman Moran, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Madam Attorney General, on May 16th, the Department of Justice announced that it dropped litigation to enforce the law against forced reset triggers. These are devices that can be installed in a few minutes on guns like a AR-15 in order to match the rate of fire of a machine gun. In fact, according to demonstrations on YouTube and elsewhere, you can dispose of an entire 30-round magazine in about 4 seconds, so it is a fully automatic weapon. In the press release announcing the settlement, you are quoted as saying the settlement, quote, will enhance public safety. How does putting more automatic weapons, which have been against the law since the 1930s, enhance public safety?
Thank you for that question, Senator Reid. What that will do, it will enhance public safety by settling the litigation, because it is a guarantee that the manufacturer will not put that in handguns. We settled those cases because it was the right decision under the law. Nothing's comical about this. These devices are materially the same as bump stocks. The Supreme Court said last year that they are not machine guns under federal law. We followed the law. We will continue to follow the law. I'm a career prosecutor. I'm going to do everything in my power to keep Americans safe. What we should be concerned about up here are all the illegal guns flowing into our country by illegal aliens who have been free to walk into our country over the past 4 years. And we've taken thousands of those guns off of the street, including drugs, and including violent criminals.
Excuse me. How can you go ahead and say we're more safe today because they will not put these automatic firing devices in pistols, which have magazines of about maybe 20 rounds at most, or maybe 10, and have a range much less than an automatic weapon? Have you ever fired an automatic weapon?
I have.
Well, you understand then that that's a device that was designed to kill people. It's not a hunting rifle. It's not a target rifle. It's mass fire. And you made a compromise saying, well, don't put them in pistols, but you can go ahead and put them out in automatic weapons.
We followed the law. We will continue to follow the law. You and I clearly disagree on the Second Amendment.
Well, I agree that machine guns are not appropriate in the United States, and since 1930 or so, we've outlawed machine guns. And these semi-automatic weapons that are produced in volume are so easily converted to automatic weapons that it's you're ignoring the reality, frankly.
I'm following the law, Senator.
Well, yes, that's right. By the way, how many American weapons are going into Mexico in a year? What are we doing to stop American weapons going to Mexico to arm their gangs?
Well, we need to support that on both sides.
Well, what are you
doing?
What are you doing to support it on our side?
We are arresting people who have illegal firearms in our country. We're not sending people back to Mexico with guns. We're throwing them in our jails and prosecuting them.
You're allowing them to be purchased in the United States and driven across the border. Most of these gangs have completely turn themselves into military organizations because they're using American weapons, American technology, and your argument is that, well, we're not doing anything about them.
No, not my argument. That was the policy of the last 4 years of the Biden administration with open borders. You could come back and forth across our borders. You could buy guns. You could take guns off the street. You could shoot people in our country. You could bring fentanyl into our country. You could bring methamphetamine into our country. You could bring cocaine into our country. That was the previous administration.
No,
not this
What
one.
are you doing to stop the flow of weapons into Mexico?
We are arresting flow of weapons into, our borders are closed. We are arresting illegal cartels. Sinaloa from Mexico, MS-13 from El Salvador, TDA. We are arresting from Venezuela. ATF has seized over 14,600 guns since Donald Trump has been president. That's a 33% increase from the last administration. And think about that. That's with our borders secure.
Were they coming into
they weren't doing anything.
Were they coming into the United States?
Our borders are closed. They're not coming in or out of the United States now across Mexico. We've done a 33% increase in firearm seizures. Think about that. Think about that, Senator, from the last administration. 33% increase. And our borders are closed. So we're getting all these guns off the streets that came into our country. And I'm so proud of the work of the men and women in law enforcement.
I don't think you've done anything to severely interrupt the arming of Mexican gangs, because that's really not what your focus, and I think your focus should be on that. But thank you, Mr. Chairman.
And can I just add one thing? And
no,
because the borders are closed, the borders are closed, we are stopping the guns from going to Mexico.
Well, let me ask you another question. If the borders are closed, why do we have a division headquarters of the United States Army in Fort Huachuca and military elements across the board when the borders close and Border Patrol can handle it?
As former military, I would think you would know the answer to that, to keep Americans safe.
No, I think it's to promote the president's policies in the border, and the readiness of our forces is suffering as a result. Thank you.
Senator Britt.
How are you?
Wonderful, thank you.
Let's actually continue on that line of questioning. I'd like to give you an opportunity to kind of answer anything that you would like, but I want to thank you for what you have done to actually close our border. When we're looking across our nation, we know that fentanyl is a leading cause of death between the ages of 18 and 45. This administration under President Trump and your leadership has said, hey, we are going to shut down the border. We're going to put the safety and security of Americans first. You have made significant strides to go after gang members, cartel members here in our interior. You have worked diligently to remove impediments to being able to prosecute those individuals. We had them in front of judiciary yesterday, a group of experts in law enforcement across the board telling us that we have thousands of cartel and gang members here in our interior. So thank you for your commitment to eliminating that threat. Talk to me about what is in this budget that will allow you to continue the work that you're doing and remove these cartel and gang members from our cities, our streets, and our communities.
Thank you, Senator. This budget requests $10 billion to bolster drug enforcement efforts and $3.2 billion for programs to combat transnational organized crime against America. And transnational crime, that's these gangs that have infiltrated, through Biden's open border policies, have infiltrated our country. Sinaloa, they want to talk about Mexico, MS-13, TDA, Venezuela. They opened their prisons in Venezuela and let these people come to our country no longer. They are so well organized. They have formed huge organizations within our country, and our DEA, our ATF, our FBI, working hand in hand, are doing everything, and with state and local authorities, are doing everything we can to stop that throughout our country. And that's why I would ask everyone to support the big, beautiful bill, because that helps our budget as well for national security.
Absolutely. And General Bondi, I want to thank you and your team. I know that ATF has seized more than 2,000 firearms
At the
going
border.
to Mexico.
At the
so
border.
despite the conversation we just heard, you have placed a seriousness on securing our border both ways and making sure that American citizens are safe. So thank you for the work that you are doing and all law enforcement officers that report to you.
Thank you.
I want to talk a little bit more about the asylum program. We have seen that be abused massively. We unfortunately, people who actually need it are caught up in backlogs. Under this previous administration, numbers skyrocketed. I know that you and the people who work with you have prioritized this to make sure that we get the fraud out of the system. We saw President Biden actually, eliminate that program. Thank you for placing emphasis on it. When there is someone who needs to claim asylum, we want them to have the opportunity to do that. But the fraud is preventing us from actually hearing these cases. So talk to me about what you're doing there and what we can do to make sure that we remove that backlog and any duplicity that we see in the system.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Senator. As of May 2025, there were 3.8 million pending cases. And that was a decrease of more than 235,000 cases over a 4-month period. My budget requests $844 million for EOR, for immigration, to support the enforcement of the federal immigration laws. This supports 734 immigration judges.
Excellent.
We got rid of the bad ones who are lazy and not doing anything, and we have ones in there now who are moving cases.
Wonderful.
And we will continue to do that. But more importantly, the big, beautiful bill adds $1.25 billion for immigration. And that's so important because we have to eliminate that backlog.
Absolutely.
And our lawyers, everyone's working tirelessly to do that. And as far as the anti-fraud program, asylum, we're doing everything to revitalize that as well.
Thank you so much. In my remaining few moments, I want to just tell you I was heartened to see your memo that created the Joint Task Force October 7th. Thank you for your commitment to getting justice for those victims, for addressing the threat that is posed by Hamas, and for combating anti-Semitism. We have seen a rise in that in the last 2 years here on our soil, and particularly in college campuses. And so when we're making sure that anti-Semitism, terrorism, and civil rights violations are adjudicated and given the proper weight of the Department of Justice, I could not be more grateful. Can you talk to us a little bit about the work that task force has done, what you're seeing, and any priorities that you are pursuing to ensure that we eliminate anti-Semitism here in the United States?
Yes, thank you, Senator. It's staffed with dedicated prosecutors, agents, analysts, and linguists. And we are working hand in hand to support all of the efforts. If you're a Jewish college student now, you should be able to freely wear your star around your necklace and around your neck on a necklace and walk into college campuses.
Absolutely.
I had a young man tell me he had to take it off at a university because he was scared to death. And I was glad he took it off for his safety. You shouldn't have to do that. You should be proud of your religion, and you should be safe to practice your religion in this country. And we will continue to do everything through the October 7th task force to protect everyone in this country.
Well, thank you so much, General Bondi, for your commitment to law and order, and appreciate all you're doing to keep Americans safe.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Fisher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome. It's good to see you here. I want to thank you, General Bondi, and your staff, and all the men and women that work for you that keep us safe. I'd like to echo Senator Moran's comments from earlier. I am always open to conversations about where federal agencies can find savings and efficiencies, and I believe that is critically important for government accountability. However, I received outreach from local law enforcement in Nebraska about the possible transfer of high-intensity drug trafficking areas program to the Justice Department. They fear this recommendation from the Office of Management and Budget could hinder the program's ability to fight drug trafficking. I appreciated your comments before the House Appropriators earlier this week, confirming that HIDA will remain where it is in the Executive Office of the President. We've heard your offers today to many on this committee. I appreciate those offers to work together to make sure that we're going to find effective and needed grants and keep those open, and I thank you for that. I continue to be concerned about the threat of the Chinese government. General Bondi, the threats that they pose to our critical infrastructure here in the United States, and that's whether we're looking at vulnerabilities in our communications network or with agriculture. The CCP is trying to exploit our information and our innovation every time. I want to recognize good work of the FBI field office in Omaha. They have been working proactively to address these state-sponsored foreign cyber threats, and especially where Nebraska's agricultural operations are concerned. How does the Justice Department's budget request support the essential work of FBI field offices so that they can address the rising threats both locally and regionally?
We have numerous threats, as you well know, from China, and you discussed. And it's not, you know, we often talk about the physical threats to our citizens, but as you pointed out, the cyber threats are so very real in our country. There's not a day that goes by that we don't discuss that. There are many meetings about that. We have some very frightening actors in our country right now, and we are making many cases regarding those. I know a particular interest in Nebraska is the agro-terrorism as well to you, and that's a high priority for our Justice Department. And this happened, I believe this one was in Michigan, but it was Chinese bringing pathogens into our country. And that was a case that I'm very proud of, that our National Security Division and our FBI made very recently, though. That was in Michigan, but we're working on, by a Chinese national.
Exactly.
And, but we're working on many in Nebraska because of your farmlands, because of the demographics of your beautiful state. And I need to correct, though, I want to correct, though, that one thing that you said with the HIDA grants. I'm a career prosecutor, and those high-intensity drug grants are very important, but $196 million of that will go to the Office of Justice programs, and we will be sure that they are administered and law enforcement receives the money that they need to continue with that.
Our law enforcement in Nebraska uses those grants, again, in a really responsible way, and they're very, very effective across the state. I'm glad you brought up about the Michigan work that you've done there with regards to ag. Sometimes this country, because we're very, very fortunate to have food security. But when we look at that and the effect it would have on national security, if some of these adversaries that we have would interfere with that, it would be devastating, not just to my state, but to our country as well. I wanted to bring to your attention something else. We've seen evidence of rising cases of cargo theft since 2020. Estimates on the financial impacts of cargo theft are upwards of $35 billion annually. A major concern of mine, beyond the immediate harm that we see there to the multimodal supply chain, is the cartel activity that's involved in this. Transnational cartels, they're increasing to turn over that cargo theft to help fund all their criminal activities, and it's a huge increase. I applaud the administration's ongoing efforts to crack down on violent crime from cartels. I hope you would look into this new activity. How do you think the department could optimize resources for federal law enforcement and prosecutors to investigate and disrupt these very, very sophisticated criminal groups like the cartels that are behind these thefts?
On my first day, we called for total elimination of cartels and TCOs, and I believe what you're talking about in your state is through, I would imagine, I-80, Interstate I-80.
Trucking, and also rail.
And the rails, but also in our states that are ports. So yes, sometimes we feel like cargo only is a port area, but it's not, because it's transported across our country. And we are on high alert and working very diligently to prevent all of that and to take out these cartels who have come into our country, and that's a very, very real threat to Americans and to your state, Senator.
Thank you again, and thank you for the good work you and your team do every single day.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Merkley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and welcome, Attorney General. And I'm sorry I wasn't here for the whole hearing, so it's been addressed, but I think you really are very sensitive to the possibility of foreign agents or foreign influence on our government and making sure that we make sure that doesn't happen.
Yes.
Yes. I want to know if when the president held his dinner for 220 individuals who purchased the most of his meme coins, were there foreign interests attending that dinner?
Senator, we're here to talk about the Department of Justice and my budget for the upcoming year. I would think that you would want to talk about the leader of the Sinaloa cartel who was living in Oregon, one of the top leaders. I would think that that's what you would want to talk about with me. When we captured him, he had $3 million cash in his home.
Attorney General, I know that you avoided the same question on the House side, but what we know is that many folks who attended this dinner were buying those coins because they wanted to influence U.S. policy. We had Mr. Javier Selgas, the head of Freight Technology, Inc., who said, I bought $2 million of these coins. I plan to buy $20 million because I want a favor from the president to change the policy regarding freight from Mexico to the United States. This solicitation of investments in his personal product, his meme coin, led to many people who were coming from foreign countries attending that dinner. Don't you think the American people have a right to know? And you said yourself you're very concerned about foreign influence on our government.
Senator, it is wildly offensive that you would accuse President Trump of not protecting American interest in our country when he is the president that has shut down our borders, unlike Joe Biden. President Trump has done everything to make America safe, and you asked me the question, and keep America safe.
Do you
and
know
you're trying to play a gotcha question at a budget hearing when you have murders left and right in your state, violent crimes, and we are doing everything we can to help your liberal state. Whether you're liberal or not, we're going to do everything we can to help the citizens of your state, and you're trying to avoid that because you're trying to play a gotcha question with the President of the United States, and it's not going to work. We're here to talk about our budget for public safety.
I do believe that as the leader of the Department of Justice, you should be concerned about foreign influence. There was obviously a lot of foreign influence and individuals who said they were there for that reason. And so will you appoint a special investigator to make sure that that foreign influence does not affect the policies of the United States of America?
I'm not going to tell you what I will or will not do, other than I will do everything to keep the people of your state safe, even though you don't want to talk about anything to do with your state because of the crime in your state. You also voted no on the Laken Riley Act. We are doing everything we can to protect the citizens of this country. You also said that President Trump encouraged protest. It was the opposite. He's done everything he can to keep us safe, and he will continue to, as well as the Department of Justice.
It speaks volumes that you won't answer the question about transparency when the president is asking people to invest in his company and his products, and that foreigners are attending these events. I think transparency would be appropriate. Are you going to recommend any ethics guidelines to make sure that foreign influence does not find its way in through the doors of the White House?
How do you characterize foreigners, the illegal aliens that have flowed into our country? Is that who you're talking about? You don't want to talk about them. You don't want to talk about the crime that has gone rampant throughout this country and your state.
Well, you know, these hearings are a chance for us to ask questions, and I assure you I'm engaged in national security in many, many ways. But this also I am concerned about, and let me turn to a different piece of the puzzle, because the president also has another cryptocurrency called USD1. It is a stable coin. There was a request by UAE to produce AI chips that would go to UAE the National Security Advisor of UAE, is also the CEO of MGX. So after that request for those chips occurred, MGX then said, we will buy 2 billion with a B, of the president's coins, and then the president went to the Middle East and said, we will get you those AI chips. Does this sequence of events in which a foreign government asked for a big favor, and we had previously banned these chips to UAE because of the national security concerns, then they buy $2 billion of the president's coins, and then the president goes to the Middle East and says, we will provide those chips? Does that sequence of events concern you about foreign influence on the United States of America?
The foreign influence on America that I would be concerned about if I were you was the Mexican national that resided in Oregon, who we just arrested, who had 384 pounds of methamphetamine. The foreign individual who I would be concerned about if I were a senator from Oregon is the Honduran drug trafficker who was residing in Portland for distributing fentanyl. The foreign national I would be concerned about if I was a Portland senator, an Oregon senator, is a Mexican national leader of a drug trafficking ring. Another one, fentanyl, firearms, fatal overdoses, all in your state.
You have made your point.
57,700 fentanyl pills and stolen firearms in Oregon. That's what we should work together on, not gotcha questions during a budget
Let me
hearing on
recognize
public
Senator
safety.
Merkley.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The Attorney General certainly has made the point that she's very concerned about issues that I'm concerned about as well regarding the security of this country. But let the record note that in terms of foreign influence and the sale of foreign influence through the president's coins, she absolutely refuses to respond and instead turns to a whole list of different topics. I think it's important for the leader of the Justice Department of the United States to be very concerned about foreign influence, and I encourage you to take on that topic and not consider it an offense that those of us who are concerned here, Democrats and Republicans, want Americans to make American decisions, not foreign influence being bought through crypto coins.
Senator Murkowski.
Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Attorney General Bondi, welcome. Welcome to the committee. Good to see you. When we visited prior to your confirmation, we had, I think, a really good discussion about some of the statistics that, unfortunately, we have held the #1 place for far too long in areas that we really don't like in terms of the increased number of deaths due to fentanyl between 22 and 23, an increase by over 40% when other states around the country were seeing that go down. We're doing a little bit better, not enough, because one death due to fentanyl is one death too many, as we would all agree. But also when it comes to violent crime, it's stunning for many people to hear a senator like me say that Alaska's violent crime rate was more than 540% of the national average in 2023. It's like stunning, just stunning, right? And so I think we had good conversation about that, what you could do in your position to help prioritize combating violent crime. I'm going to channel a little bit of Alaskans' conversations. We don't have much of an ICE presence in Alaska. We just haven't. We had 2 Russians seeking asylum a couple years ago when the war in Ukraine broke out. ICE didn't know what to do with them because we just didn't have a presence here. And all of a sudden, we're now on the map. We have those that are being detained in our local jail that were flown up to the state several weeks ago to be detained up there. So there's a lot of chatter about what is going on. And what I'm hearing, the fear that I am hearing, and I'd like you to just put to rest some of the concerns that Alaskans are having. They're worried that immigration enforcement is being prioritized over combating violent crime. And they're worried as they're seeing FBI and DEA coming in, assisting ICE in immigration enforcement. Again, many of the stories that we're hearing, it's not necessarily criminals that they are making the news. It's one one individual who has been a restaurant owner down in Soldotna for the past 20 years, and his children are all integrated into the community. You've heard these stories many, many, many times. So I need to know, for Alaskans' sake, the response as to whether or not immigration enforcement is being prioritized over combating violent crime, and whether increased resources, whether it's staff or funding, are being sent to the state to help us cover the added workload. So that's my question. You've got a runway of about 2 minutes here to help me out.
Thank you, Senator. I learned more about Alaska from you in our meeting prior to my confirmation hearing than I ever knew, and we have talked about it.
And you're still invited to come up and see for yourself.
We have a trip planned, and we have some information for you on that trip, and that also we wanted to talk about the missing and murdered Indigenous people and the tribal resource response plans. We wanted to visit some of those areas in a different setting. We can give you more details on that. Good. But we have 2 dates or 3 we'd like to run by you if that works, and 2 locations we'd like to go to. But yes, we've added 2 FBI agents in Alaska. We're adding more. Director Patel and I have talked about Alaska at great length. He met with you about Alaska as well and what we can do. I'm going to try to talk fast. We have criminally charged 39 defendants over the last 4 months under Operation Take Back America, nationwide, though, to eliminate the cartels and transnational gangs. And the District of Alaska, we have charged 39, I don't know if you knew that, 39 criminal defendants just in Alaska under Take Back America, more throughout the country. But we're going to continue to fight. Your demographic is so unusual, and the hours of darkness and the temperatures and your lack of resources and your tribal population that we are working. I have also spoken to our new Gadi Saralta, who will be our new U.S. Marshal, about getting you additional resources in Alaska. I've spoken to Gadi at length about that as well, and as soon as he is in place in office, we want to sit down and meet with you about that.
Well, I appreciate all that, and I'm looking forward to the opportunity for you to come to the state. So I am hearing you saying that you are committing more resources to this effort, which we're very thankful for, and as you have heard very clearly, we desperately needed, given the statistics as they relate to violent crime and of course, fentanyl. And so the specific ask is whether or not immigration enforcement is being prioritized over combating violent crime. And I just want to know that we're not taking the eye off the ball there.
And Senator, before you walked in, I think senators on both sides of the aisle shared that same concern, and it is not and it will not. A lot of it does go hand in hand, though, getting the illegal aliens who are violent criminals out of our country, but it will not. And I believe we've also seized 4.5, I think this is right, kilos of fentanyl since January in Alaska. But we will not forget about Alaska. We will prioritize Alaska and do everything we can to increase resources to help you and the citizens of your state.
Very good, and thank you. And I will be following up with a phone call regarding a NOFA for the delay in the release of some OVC tribal set-aside. So you've given us all encouragement to give you a call and know that we'll be doing that with regards to Mountain Village.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
General Bondi, all of us on this subcommittee and actually the full Appropriations Committee have learned more about Alaska.
We saw the big map, and it was truly amazing.
Thank you, Chairman Warren and Ranking Member Van Hollen. Thanks for holding this hearing. Welcome, General Bondi.
Thank you, Senator.
Good to see you. I want to raise with you something that's been deeply concerning to me, General Bondi. The 2024 Democrat nominee for Vice President actually called federal immigration agents Donald Trump's modern-day Gestapo. This is dangerous for our agents, it's wrong, and it cuts against and it undercuts the rule of law. So I want to ask you a series of questions, General Bondi, and if you would accommodate me, I would appreciate it. First, you'll agree when a bill is passed by Congress and signed by the President, it's law, right?
Yes, Senator.
And until that law is changed by Congress, you have a duty to follow it, right? That's what the rule of law is.
Yes, Senator.
So let me read the law. We got it right here. On a warrant issued, in this case by the Secretary of Homeland Security, an alien may be arrested and detained pending a decision on whether the alien is to be removed from the United States. That's the law, isn't it? The law on the books passed by Congress that you have to follow, correct?
Yes, Senator.
Isn't it also the law that once an alien is ordered removed, quote, during the removal period, the Secretary of Homeland Security again, shall detain the alien? Is that the law?
It's correct, Senator.
It doesn't say illegal aliens ordered removed should be allowed to roam the country freely, does it?
No, Senator.
I know it doesn't. Here's another law. When an alien is ordered removed, the Secretary of Homeland Security shall remove the alien from the United States. Is there any ambiguity in these words?
No, Senator.
So ICE agents enforcing those laws aren't the Gestapo. They're supporting the rule of law, aren't they?
Yes, Senator.
Is it a crime to obstruct federal agents?
Yes, Senator.
There are left-wing radicals all over the country physically attacking ICE agents. There are sanctuary cities that are interfering with law enforcement. How does the Department of Justice plan to hold those seeking to harm and obstruct federal agents? How do you hold them accountable?
Senator, I believe you've seen what we've been doing during the Los Angeles riots. We came in, if you spit on a law enforcement officer, no longer. We will charge you federally. If you loot a building, we will charge you with robbery under the Hobbs Act. All these people coming in, looting these businesses. They just called it looting and let them run out the door. No longer. You touch a law enforcement officer, we will identify you. We have great technology now. And those people are the ones who have really been wearing the mask and trying to cover their identities. We've been finding them. We have been charging them with assault on a federal officer, and there will be no offers and no negotiations.
Well, think about it. A federal facility, an ICE facility, was under siege in Los Angeles. I mean, certainly, you and the president weren't going to stand by, were you?
Absolutely not.
No, I appreciate that. I'm grateful to you and to President Trump for upholding the rule of law in this case. I want to finish by revisiting a conversation you and I had back during your nomination, because I very much appreciated that. And it has to do with my home state, the city of Memphis, your commitment to come and see us in Memphis to deal with the fact that we've had rising crime. This is a problem across the country. But I'd like to ask your commitment again, General, to deploy law enforcement resources, particularly prosecutorial resources in Tennessee as they're needed.
I know you deeply care about Tennessee and the crime in Memphis and throughout your state, and you have called me numerous times to talk about that, and you care about our U.S. attorneys there, and I welcome talking to both sides of the aisle, working with you on any matters regarding law enforcement. But yes, you care deeply about the citizens of your state, as well as Senator Blackburn, and thank you both for caring so much and your input on our U.S. attorney there.
Thank you, General Bondi, and I look forward to seeing you in my home state sometime very soon.
Thank you, Senator.
Senator Capito.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank the ranking member, and I thank General Bondi for being here today. And I want to pay you a compliment to begin, because you speak with such forceful clarity. It's very nice to hear exactly where you want to go, how you're going to get there, and how important it is to uphold the laws of this country. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Senator.
I wanted to point out the ATF's National Tracing Center, which is in West Virginia, is the only one of its kind to trace U.S. and foreign manufactured firearms. The facility provides critical information that helps solve crimes, detect trafficking, and track the movement of crime-related firearms. In 2024, that National Tracing Center processed more than 600,000 requests. I just want to make certain that in the budget, that there is enough in the budget to meet the demands, and that these critical services can be sustained with the budget requests that you've made.
Senator, our budget continues to fully fund the National Tracing Center. I will personally make sure that that is funded. It will continue to be operated by ATF as well, and it does such important work. Even in my years in a courtroom, they do amazing work. I've seen the work they do firsthand, and I would also, in all my spare time, I would love to visit that center.
That would be great.
I really want to visit that center and see what we can do also to enhance it and work with you on that. It's so important. You know, these are issues that cross party lines. I mean, this is what every American in our country, we should be working together on, and I'm glad Senator Van Hollen has stayed. I know others have other committee meetings, but he stayed here and listened to this. You know, this tracing work helps every American, Democrat and Republican, victims, all victims across every state alike, and it's such important work, and you have been a true advocate for it for your state, and thank you for that, Senator.
Thank you, and I look forward to having you visit. That would be a wonderful experience. Good to see it firsthand. I am a little bit concerned about the ATF proposed merger with DEA. I'm not going to ask a question on that so much, but we have received a lot of concern from constituents if that would dilute any of the different functions that each one of those does. Also, on the HIDTA task force, there's a proposal to move that over from ONDCP to DOJ. Oh, well, Maryland, we share a HIDTA task force out of the Baltimore region into the Panhandle. We have one in southern West Virginia. This is critical for our area, the coordination of resources. I got it. How are you seeing that in terms of bringing it? I know it's been proposed in the past. What's your perspective on bringing HIDTA within the DOJ?
Yeah, it will go under Office of Justice Programs, OJP, but it will continue to help Americans. I don't think you were here when we spoke about it earlier, but it transfers $196 million to the HIDTA areas, and I will do everything in my power to be sure that those areas and those local law enforcement officers are funded. And I see why people are concerned to go back to the ATF-DEA merger. Change is hard. And what we want to do with ATF, Senator, we want to put them back on the streets. Instead of going to the homes of lawful gun owners in the middle of the night, we want them to be out arresting the bad guys for illegal firearms. We're doing away with the bureaucracy at the top. It's being streamlined, but ATF will go back to its core function. Those agents will be on the street going after the guns, the drugs, working hand in hand with DEA, and they will continue to do great work. And I frankly think they're excited to be out there doing cops work, what they signed up to do.
Right. Well, we'll see how that evolves, and I appreciate your response there. Hazleton is also in my district, which is a very large prison with over 3,000 inmates. They've had some issues out there, big issues out there, allegations of, with staff shortages, gross mismanagement, abuse, cover-up, falsifying documents. I'm sure you're tracking these issues. I do want to compliment the president on his appointment of William Marshall, a West Virginian, former state trooper from the state of West Virginia. He's going to do a fantastic job. So thank you for bringing in such a strong advocate. He's already been very responsive to us on Hazleton, which has had kind of chronic issues throughout the last several years, regardless of what administration it's been. So I want to put that on your radar screen. And lastly, I will say I've been a big supporter of the Violence Against Women Act. I'm proud of the work that we've championed here on the Appropriations Committee for this. It's really sad when you think of what happens in families sometimes, and the proliferation of violence is extremely concerning to me. I've worked in this area for a long time, so I just wanted to let you know my passion in this area. And again, thank you for being here, and thank you all.
Thank you, Senator, and thank you for letting us steal Bill Marshall. I think all of you will think the world of him, our new Director of Bureau of Prisons.
Senator Capito, thank you. We do not intend to have a second round of questions, but in our usual fashion, I'm going to call on Senator Van Hollen for his concluding questions and wrap up, and then I'll do the same.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Attorney General Bondi, I have some budget-related questions to follow up on here. First, with respect to the proposal with the ATF. I've heard your testimony here. I heard it in the House, so I really don't want to get into a I'm not questioning you about the policy at this point in time. I think you hear there's bipartisan disagreement here. But I do want to understand your view with respect to the appropriations law, because current appropriations law does require congressional authorization to make this change, to make this merger. And so my question to you, as the Chief Law Enforcement Officer of the United States, is will you comply with the budget authorization law?
We will comply with the budget law. And you know, Senator, I'm glad you brought this merger up, because if I was still a state prosecutor and hearing this, I would be concerned too about what's happening to ATF. ATF will keep its brand. DEA will keep its brand. But what they're doing, they're going under one umbrella, doing away with the bureaucracy at the top. These agents are going, they want to be out hunting down criminals. That's what they want to do. They work, so much of this work is the same work, going back and forth. And now they will be working collaboratively together to keep America safe. And we're going to put hundreds of agents back, thousands, back on the streets, and that's where they want to be. And I would have had the initial concerns that you have about that. But give us a chance, let it work, let the DEA and ATF work together, get those agents out there, do away with the bureaucracy, and hopefully we will make America safer as a result of it.
Well, I will say that this wasn't just my reaction to the proposal. I was actually hearing from ATF agents as well. So again, we will obviously review that question in a bipartisan way on the committee, but I just wanted your assurance, and I appreciate it, that you'll comply with the appropriations law, which would require congressional action in order to go forward with that.
We don't need congressional action for this move, however.
Well, I thought I just got clarification. Well, it's going to be important to both the chairman and myself to understand your position as Attorney General on whether or not you can proceed with this merger without congressional action.
We are keeping ATF, we are keeping DEA. We are putting them under the same umbrella within the Department of Justice.
So I'm not arguing with you here. I want to understand your position. I think it will be important to members on both sides of the committee. The appropriations law currently would require that Congress approve of this merger. And so my question to you as Attorney General is, do you agree with that or disagree with that?
We will complete this reorganization, and I'm committed, I will look at that under the law. We will not violate the law, Senator, and we will work with Congress regarding that.
No, I appreciate that. So the second point I wanted to raise had to do with the prosecution of hate crimes, and I share your vigor in wanting to go after and prosecute hate crimes. I would just point out that the budget that you submitted zeroes out funding for 3 of the DOJ hate crimes programs. The hate crimes training program, Shepard Bird Hate Crimes, the Javara Hire No Hate Act, and the community approaches to advancing justice. So I hope you'll work with the committee if we seek to restore funding for those programs.
Yes, Senator, I just pulled up the details of those 3. Let me see. I'd be happy to discuss those with you further.
Good. And finally, I want to go back.
All 3 of those.
Thank you. I want to go back to the issues of grant determinations, because I think there continues to be some confusion between grants that had already been obligated that were withheld. And to my knowledge, there are about 400 of those still pending. It'd be helpful to get from your team if you have a different number. And then there's what we call notices for information, which relates to notices for future grant awards in this current fiscal year.
Yes, there is a difference.
And so I understood your earlier testimony to say, with respect to the notices, you do plan, the department plan to issue those very shortly. Is that right?
Yeah, and Senator, yes, you are correct on that. We notified the affected grantees and members of Congress regarding the terminations and how to appeal. That was the $811 million of grants that were initially terminated in 2025. We're also talking about upcoming ones as well.
Right. So I want to leave this hearing with some clarity on this issue. So when it comes to the notices of funding opportunities, because the clock is ticking on this fiscal year, do you and the Department of Justice intend to quickly notify people of those opportunities going forward?
Yes, Senator Van Hollen, as I said earlier, and it will be done on a rolling basis, but yes, within the coming weeks, we are absolutely doing that, yes.
And so finally, on
a rolling basis.
On the other category, which are the grants that had been previously obligated, I do have concerns, Madam Attorney General, with the idea that the way we're going to get them to stop being withheld is members of Congress calling. I appreciate the invitation, and I will look to see if we've been hearing from people. But this category of grants relates to people who already went through the process and already had those grants obligated, and they're currently being held.
Mm-hmm.
So my question to you is, can you tell us how many are still being held today? And I don't like the idea that in order for somebody to get their withheld grant, unheld, that they have to call a member of Congress. That should be, so how many are left? Do you know? How many of these grants are?
I don't know exactly, Senator, but I know many of them are the subject of ongoing litigation, so I wouldn't be able to speak of that in detail in this forum anyway.
Well, maybe just a follow-up, because it would be helpful to try to narrow the scope of this. Again, my understanding, and this was the subject of the letter I referenced earlier from a number of senators.
And I have not read that letter, but I will be happy to read that letter.
If you and your team could get back to us right away on that, because these are grants that, as the chairman knows, have been previously obligated, some many years ago, but frozen. And so the question is, how can we get them unfrozen? And members of Congress will call, but not everybody, can just call up their member of Congress or thinks of calling their member of Congress. We need a process that's fair to everybody. I hope you'd agree.
And actually, citizens have called as well.
Well, exactly. And so, exactly. So, but again, this is an ongoing issue. And I know colleagues on both sides of the aisle are hearing from it, folks. So, Mr. Chairman, unless something else comes up, that's it. And look forward to continuing the conversation.
It's not my intention to ask any topics or questions that cause you to come back again, but if I do.
Thank you, Senator Moran.
You're welcome, General. First of all, I want to tell you how much I appreciate the service of Gaddy Seralto. While I'm not a Floridian, I do know him, and I know him because I visited the U.S. Marshals in Florida to learn what they do and what their jobs are, and he was a great host and very knowledgeable, and I look forward to his public service now nationwide.
Thank you.
You mentioned in your testimony about the Bureau of Prisons, and I'm pleased. It's kind of one thing that probably doesn't get the attention that it deserves among us and perhaps others. And Kansas is the home to a federal prison. Hiring and retention has been a significant, I assume, issue, lack of personnel. And I just would give you the opportunity to tell us how things are going. I think we're also, where the federal prison is located in Kansas, has a number of state prisons as well, and they compete for officers and employees. But nationwide, we need more staffing, it appears, at Bureau of Prisons, and I'd be interested in knowing how you think we will address that, and if you are.
I had a handwritten note here for you on the Leavenworth, Kansas, $50 million we are building with all exclamation marks in Kansas. Yeah, the BOP, I feel like, for lack of a better term, it's been a stepchild of the Department of Justice. That's probably not the right term, but I feel like they've been left out. And that was one thing as a career prosecutor that I care deeply about. And when Gowdy Serralta gets in here, that was one of the positions that we searched high and low for the best person for the job. Because as a prosecutor, I know you can't lock everyone up forever. You don't want to lock everyone up forever. But you want people to succeed when they go to prison. You want them to be able to succeed when they get out. Otherwise, you will have a revolving door. And that's what I feel our prison has been lacking. It's been a mess. BOP has been a mess. And that is one of the areas where we are greatly increasing funding. And the big, beautiful bill gives us a lot of money for increasing that. Not only that, but also for the First Step Act, for the halfway houses, to give people an opportunity after they've served their time to get out and be successful. And I believe there are many programs that should have been instituted in the federal prisons that have not been. Programs while you are an inmate. But we also have to have retention and bonuses and reasons for our prison guards to want to work in that environment. I think that's one of the toughest things that as Attorney General I have to tackle. But with Gowdy Serralta by my side, I know we're going to be able to do that. I pray we are every day.
General, one of the other areas that, and you may be very cognizant of this, that I think we sometimes overlook, and I certainly don't want to diminish the significant support that this subcommittee and people individually give to law enforcement, federal, state, local. We pay a lot of attention to the FBI, DEA, ATF, U.S. Marshals in this subcommittee, but I sometimes think we overlook U.S. attorneys, prosecutors. We can arrest people, but we need to make certain that we have a process by which the prosecution occurs and justice is ultimately attained. Anything you would like for us to know in this subcommittee as we pay attention to the total arena of not only arresting and law enforcement, but also the aspect of prosecution?
Senator, thank you for saying that. I've had the honor and privilege of working with, I believe, the brightest lawyers in the entire country in the Department of Justice. Not only our incredible U.S. attorneys, but in our civil division, throughout our criminal division, throughout every division in the department. But yes, the U.S. attorneys are second to none, and they are out there tirelessly fighting to keep people safe. I think what a lot of people don't realize is when we talk about FBI, DEA, ATF, all those cases from conception are being done hand in hand with the U.S. attorneys, even in the investigative stages. You only see them in the courtroom after the cases have been made, but that's of course not true. They are working tirelessly, and they are the best of the best, and our law enforcement officers are the bravest of the brave in this country.
I try never to admit my failures, but at a young age, I don't know, maybe 32 or something, I thought I should be the U.S. attorney for my home state, and I was terribly unqualified, I'm quite certain, but it was a very appealing job for the combination of public service, law enforcement, and protection of people. I think it's a very, we need to make certain that those individuals who prosecute in a U.S. attorney's office are recognized and honored.
Thank you.
And then, I helped create and pass legislation a number of years ago. I would highlight this again, and I think this grant program exists, but I'm not sure it's existing the way that I'd hoped. There are so many small local law enforcement offices. The city police department, the county sheriff's office, they don't have grant writers. And what I was trying to accomplish in a legislative effort and just getting the support of previous attorney generals was to create a grant program that eliminated much of the bureaucracy, paperwork, the efforts that are so time-consuming for a department that has a handful of officers, none of them grant writers, and if somebody's writing a grant, they're being taken off the street, off the township roads, and I want to make certain that you're aware of that effort and would be supportive of it and encourage it. Find ways to get those law enforcement agencies, small in nature, but who provide such tremendous support in our communities, to make sure that they have access to federal dollars, as do some of the larger departments.
Yes, I've learned more about grants in the last 6 months than I ever thought I would in my entire career. But yes, we've been working to improve accessibility by funding and simplifying the grant process. Reading these convoluted grants makes your head spin. And so we are working to streamline that and to help our rural and communities as well.
And
we'll
General,
do
you
everything.
highlighted something that I would be remiss if I didn't perhaps correct what I say. I'm happy to have you reduce the bureaucracy and paperwork with any grant for any agency, whatever size, not just small and rural communities, but they have a particular problem that it's really hard for them to meet. And then, to follow up with Senator Van Hollen not here, I'll follow up with what he was saying. He was asking you about in following the law in regard to DEA ATF, what was called a merger. What I heard you say is that you used the word merger and you used the word umbrella. And I think the difference is that the two agencies, at least if this is to confirm I understand what you were saying, the two agencies continue to exist, but the oversight that occurs at the Department of Justice will be an umbrella over the two agencies. There's no actual official merger between the two. There's supervision. This umbrella is different to me. The word is different than a merger.
Yes, Senator.
Does that make sense?
Yes, Senator.
Okay. And then finally, as I shook your hand and said good morning to you this morning, you volunteered the importance of NIBIN, and I wanted to give you a chance to further extend those remarks during this hearing. ATF has a particularly strong presence in Wichita, Kansas. It includes a crime gun intelligence center at Wichita State University, a new correlation center that works in tandem with the one in Redstone Arsenal in Alabama, and opening next year is a new lab that will support revolutionary techniques to analyze DNA that comes from crime guns and casings. My question is that tell me what I want to give you a fuller opportunity to tell me about the importance of science and technology in the ATF and other law enforcement agencies being able to complete their jobs.
Thank you, Senator. NIBIN is a very crucial tool in our fight against gun violence and gun crime. In fact, I believe I've used them many times when I was a state prosecutor very early in my career and throughout my career. Analyzing the ballistics information is vitally important. We will continue to do everything we can. And I know it's very important to our sheriffs, to our state and local law enforcement officers. And we are going to do everything to be sure that NIBIN is fully funded. Let me assure all Americans we will do that.
Thank you. If you'd give me just one moment. Again, this is probably an issue maybe for the Department of Homeland Security more than the Department of Justice, but to highlight this for you as the nation's law enforcement officer, again in those rural counties where we have a county or district attorney, and we have the human trafficking occur and arrests take place, the victims of human trafficking, then there's no interpreter, there's no place to house the victims. They begin to disappear within the community, and then there's no prosecution because there's no victim to provide the testimony to convict the potential perpetrator of that crime. I don't know whether you have anything you want to say about this, but I want this to be known that just as the federal government in its involvement in trying to help us deter and eliminate human trafficking, we struggle to have the resources necessary to meet the needs of those who are being trafficked.
Yes, we do. And I realize that is a very important aspect in your state as well. Interpreters are a huge thing. I witnessed that when I was a prosecutor in Florida, and we have to do everything we can to support our state and local law enforcement working hand in hand because, again, many of those communities are very rural. Let me clarify one thing. Can I please go back? I'm glad you're back, Senator Van Hollen. You do have to, of course, appropriate the funds for our reorganization. You called it a merger, I called it a reorganization. But of course, the funds would be appropriated by Congress. And we, of course, will work with you to follow the law, and we hope you support that, the funding for the ATF and the DEA to work under one umbrella. I think we were saying the same thing in a different way.
We'll have to compare notes and see whether we're on the same page, but thank you.
Let the record show that it was you that provoked Senator Van Hollen to return to the microphone. Senator Van Hollen, thank you for your cooperation today, and to our committee members who were here. It is a busy time in the United States Senate. Our appropriations process is hugely important. We want to complete all of our appropriation bills, including Commerce, Justice, and Science, and we want those appropriation bills to march their way across the Senate floor, be considered by the House, and signed by the President. It's hugely important to your department and to the country that we not once again end up in a situation in which we're incapable of doing that, and we have a continuing resolution that leaves things in limbo. If there are no further questions, senators may submit their additional questions for the subcommittee's official hearing record. We request your response within 30 days. So there may be written questions submitted to you, to the Department of Justice, and we'd appreciate and ask for your 30 days response. And with that, the subcommittee stands in recess to the call of the chair.
For the Department of Justice, the money will support federal law enforcement as well as our state, local, and tribal law enforcement partners. My primary objective as Attorney General is to return the department to its core mission of keeping Americans safe and vigorously enforcing the law. This budget will allow us to continue to do just that. Since January 20th, we have dismantled deadly fentanyl networks across our nation. We prosecuted MS-13 and TDA members using terrorism and RICO charges. We've seized thousands of